computer. So yeah, where's it? GitHub. Part-time Charlie. Curriculum. So our module 1, open that new window. Week 2, open that new window from last Tuesday, which is the 11th. So I'm going to scroll down here. We went over application users, that first one, during the evening, during stand down. So here we go, part-time Charlie, some pairs. I'm going to fork this over to my personal GitHub, Tom Preet. It's copying it over. There it goes. So Tom Preet, some pairs forked over. So mine says some pairs -2, just because I already have a some pairs in my local on my GitHub. So I already have a some pairs repo name. So next, I'm going to clone this down by clicking this little green button, green code button, and copying it to my clipboard. I'm going to open up a new VS Code window. Where did it go? All right, there we go. I'm going to quickly open up the terminal. And to quickly open up the terminal, you can do Control-tilde, which will open and close the terminal quickly. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to CD into my desktop, CP challenges, Charlie challenges. I'm going to list everything out. So I've got my app users, my OOP intro lecture, and some Roman numerals. I'm going to git clone, followed by pasting that some pairs challenge. Now I can list everything out again, ls. So I got that some pairs right there. I can CD into some pairs. So when I CD into it, so notice how here there is no master, there's no Git repository in part-time or Charlie challenges. But when I get CD into some pairs, there is a Git repository attached to it. So now I want to open up some pairs into a new VS Code window. So I'm going to code space -r space period, which will reload VS Code and open up some pairs in the Explorer. All right. You want me to do it in Python or JavaScript? You want me to do TDD in JavaScript? We're doing TDD in JavaScript. Yeah, be careful when you're saying Java, because Java is a totally different language. So yeah, so JavaScript. All right. I don't know Java. I heard it's more of a more difficult.
That's a hard language right there.
It's a whole different beast. All right. So I'm going to use test-driven development. So using Jest. So I'm a new developer. I don't know how to do TDD. I've heard of it before, and I heard of this library called Jest before that I should use. So I'm new. I'm going to use, say, Jest JavaScript. And I've got this Jest delightful JavaScript testing library. Whoa. I'm going to say getting started just because I'm new. It says getting started, install Jest using Yarn. I don't use Yarn, I use npm. So you can either use Yarn or npm. But it says npm install -- save -- dev Jest. I'm just going to read through the documentation first, just to kind of see what the hell's going on here. It says, let's get started by writing some hypothetical function that adds 2 numbers. All right, so we have a sum.js file right here. Then we also have a sum.test.js. Okay, so that's what goes in there. And it says add the following section to your package.json file. I don't know what a package.json file is. Can anybody tell me what a package.json file is?
That's all your dependencies, right?
Yep, it stores all of our dependencies and allows us to essentially export our little program and make it a make it a library.
And it's in JSON format, which is, I think it stands for JavaScript object notation. Is that right?
Yep. So add filing stage. Okay, I'm still new. I've never heard of a package.json file. I don't have one in my local directory. So Google's your best friend. Early on, as a new programmer, you'll be reading documentation 80% of the time versus coding only 20% of the time. It is a package.json file. And how do I create one? Let's see what shows up. Creating a package.json file. So you can add a package.json file to your package. All right. So you can read through the documentation. All right. So I guess here's an example of one. Okay, creating a new package.json file. You can create a package.json file by running the command line interface questionnaire or creating a default package.json file. I'm going to run it using the CLI. So navigate to the root directory of your package. So let's see if I'm at the root directory. I want to be inside of this JavaScript JS directory. Excuse me. So I'm going to cd JS, list everything out. So if there's my JavaScript and my spec file, it says run the following command, npm init. Okay, run npm init. Run that. Okay, so this utility will walk you through creating a package.json file. Great. So package name is called JS as default. I can just leave it at that, or I can name it something else if I want to, something else. But I'm just going to leave everything as the default. So version 1.0, description, entry point, test command, keywords. I'm just going to press enter as default. So here's my package.json file skeleton. Great. And is this okay? Yes, it is okay. Cool. So I've just created my package.json file. All right. What questions do you have about creating a package.json file using the command line interface? No. Or you can literally just manually create one like package.json like that and copy over some of this stuff. Any questions about package.json file?
Do you need that before you install Jest, or we'll just create it for you?
So you don't need a package.json file to install Jest. I can't remember I don't think it creates a package.json file for you if you install it. But I could be wrong. But I like to create my package.json file before I even install anything.
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, I made a mistake and did it by mistake to just first, and no, it doesn't.
Okay. So I think it
Shows up in the modules.
Yep. Yeah. So your node module shows up, but your package.json file doesn't show up.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to the top. So I'm going to do npm install. I'm just going to copy that over. I'm going to clear the terminal. So npm install --save -dev. And this means it's saving it as a dev dependency. Well, you don't necessarily need that. You can also just save it like that. npm install Jest, and it'll work just fine if I did that. So if I look at my package.json file, you'll see it kind of change as it's updating, as everything's installing. And it might take a little while because Jest relies on a bunch of other different npm packages. So notice how it says added 324 packages. That's how many packages Jest relies on. Again, Jest is one of many different JavaScript testing libraries. A bunch of developers got together and were like, hey, we think we know the best way to write unit tests in JavaScript. And so they developed Jest. There's a bunch of other ones. There's, what is it? Like Jasmine, Mocha, Chai, all kinds of different ones. But Jest is, yep.
I have a quick question about this. So for this one, we're testing the sum pairs. Okay, but we've already run through this before. Let's say on a different block of code, we've used npm and we've used Jest. So each time when I'm in, like right now, I'm in the folder for sum pairs. Do I need to start with npm init and then npm install Jest each time that I'm doing it for a
Yes.
new file?
Yes.
Okay.
I won't say new file, a new npm or a new directory. So
Okay.
if I was in a different directory, like a different JavaScript, if I was doing Armstrong numbers in the JavaScript directory, I would still need to npm install or npm init, npm install Jest as well.
Okay, I see that. That way we have the JSON file in each directory that we're
Yep.
working. Okay.
And this will happen to some of you. You might have like an npm node modules here and a package.json here, but you also might have a node modules or package.json file in a parent directory somewhere. And when you go to run like this, when you do like npm test or whatever, you'll get a conflict because it'll see two package.json files, one in your current directory and one in a parent directory somewhere. And it'll be like, hey, we don't know which one to use. So it'll throw an error. So just be cognizant of where you're actually installing your package.json file and your node modules to make sure that there isn't one in a child directory and a parent directory. Make sure they're all in like unique directories.
Is there a way to configure, and this is kind of an outline question, but is there a way to configure it globally? Like every JavaScript file on your machine is going to get that?
Yeah, you can install packages globally. So you can have access to like Jest globally if you wanted to. But yeah, typically I don't install things globally. But yeah, you can configure certain libraries or packages to be installed globally. All right. Yeah, good questions. All right.
One of the challenges we had in the required field, they had that, and I kept wondering why I kept getting the error. I can't remember what challenge it is that you guys hadn't already set up the test file. And I kept getting the error, and it was because of that they had the global in there. And he kept saying he can't see anything global.
Yeah, I'm actually not quite sure what that's referring to. But yeah, we can take that offline if it's still an issue.
Okay.
All right. So we can write a function, but we haven't written that yet. But we can write some unit tests for our test.js. And here it has the testing file is .test.js. But here are files some pairs spec.js. And that's okay, but you'd have to configure Jest to look for a file that has spec.js in it. But that's kind of too much work for me to do right now. So I'm just going to rename my test file to .test.js just so Jest knows to look for knows what file to look for. All right, let me see, look at this. So down here, I also need to, in my test, in my scripts for the test, I need to put Jest in there. So if I look over at my package.json file, it just has this right now. So I'm just gonna add Jest right there, save that. And notice how we have our dependencies here as jest shows up. All right. So I'm going to close my package.json file. I'm going to close that. And I don't like the way this is exported. I like the way the syntax of this to export functions. So what I'm going to do is make this a fat arrow function, and then module dot exports equals some pairs, like so. And then in here, I'm just going to do some pairs require from some pairs. All right. So I'm just going to write a few tests, probably the ones they gave us for some pairs. So these, I'll just convert these to unit tests. So I'm just going to copy those over like so. And I'm going to look at the documentation just to look at what I can actually, how like from a syntax perspective, what this actually kind of does. So I'm going to copy this over. I'm just trying to try to emulate this unit test to correspond with this unit test. So I'm going to say test, but not test watch. I don't know where that came from. All right, so test. I'm going to add input of this value and 9 to equal a nested array of 4, 5, and then fat arrow function. And then it says like expect, instead of some, I'm going to do some pairs of, I guess I could just copy this over. Instead of some pairs. And I've got 2B. What are other things we can have? So we have using matchers. So we've got expect to be null, to be undefined, not to be undefined, not to be truthy, to be falsy. So we have all these methods that we can use. So to equal, maybe to equal, to be and equal are equivalent for numbers. Okay, that's interesting. I'm just going to use 2B for right now. Maybe that works, maybe that doesn't. So to be that. So that's what this input is. I'm going to delete that. I'm just going to copy this down again. And so, and 7 to equal that. Should copy this over. 7. And then likewise for that last one. So 3158. Whoop. So 3158. So writing unit tests does take a little while to equal. God dang it. So there we go. We got that. All right. So those are my 3 unit tests that I am writing. All right. What questions do you have about me writing those? And these might work. I don't know if this 2B will work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I might have to use a different method. All right, now in order to run this file, I can npm run test or just npm, I think test might work. So it's running jest, running some pairs test. And there we go. It said test suites ran, one failed. All right, let's see what happened. So received undefined. Okay, so all these failed. So those are my 3 unit tests, and they all failed. All right. So let's go ahead and write this. So it needs to take 2 inputs, an array, and some number, and it's going to return. Well, I just won't even do that yet. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. I can just do like a nested for loop and loop through it. Does anybody have any questions? All right. So my initial intuition is, so right here, my input numbers or input array is sorted, but down here it's not sorted. Oh. Thank you. So probably the first thing I want to do is probably sort my input array. And then once it's sorted, I can either do a nested for loop, but that's not that efficient. What I'm thinking of doing is testing having a left index and right index and comparing the sum of those. And if those sums equal my input number, then I can push that to an array. Otherwise, so here's what I'm trying to say. If I have this as my input number, I want to compare 1 and 5. So let's actually. So what is that? 9. So if my input array is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and my number I want to check against is 9, I want to check the first index and the last index to see what they sum to. So equals 6, and that is less than my input. So I want to now check 2 and 5. So I need to increase my tracker index, I guess it would be my left index, by 1. So that now check 2 plus 5, and that equals 7. And that is less than my input. So I'm just going to keep going down until, so I'm going to check 3, and that is 8, and that is less than my input of 9. And then I want to check 4, which is 9. And that equals my input. Therefore, I want to push that into an array. Push 4 and 5 into an array. So I can do like a while the left index is less than the right index, keep checking or keep going through this logic. If I did the same thing for 7, let's try 7 next. Or I'll just actually, because 7 has 2 values. So I'll check 5 is less than my input. So 2 and 5 equals input. So I'll need to push that into the array. 2 and 5. So push that into array. And then, so I have a match there. Next thing I want to do is, so if 2 and 5 equal it, I can do one of 2 things. I can either increase this value or check 3 and 5. Or I can just check. So I can check 3 and 5 next, or I can check 2 and 4 next. So I'm going to check 2 and 4 next. So I'm going to decrease my left, or I'm sorry, my right index. So which is 6. So since that is less than, no. Yes, so that is less than my input. So if that part decrease right index increase left index. Whoop. So if 4 and 5, that means I want to increase my left index. If I do that, now I'm checking 3 plus 4, which equals 7. And now I can push that into my array. 3 and 4, push that into array. And at that point, I'd probably, so if I push that into the array, then I would decrease my right index, therefore it'd be 3 plus 3, but I'm only doing this while my while my left index is less than my right index. So that's kind of the code right there, or that's the logic of doing that. So now if I wanted to actually solve that, I can say let array of nums. So this is my answer array. I can even just call it answer. Next thing I want to do, I want to sort the input array because I don't want this value. Yeah, I want my input array to be sorted. So I can say let sorted array equals array.sort. And now I can grab the left and right index. So like let right equals the sorted array.length -1, because that's the length of the array. I can say let left equals 0 because it wants to start at the value at 0 index. And now here I can say while left is less than right. I'm used to writing Python, so I can grab the sum of that. So let sum equals sorted array at index right, or I'll say left, plus sorted array at index right. So that's the sum. So I can say if sum equals the input number, I can, my answer array, which is the array of numbers, I can push an array of these values right there. So I'm pushing that, and then I'm decreasing my right index by 1, else if, so if it's greater than yeah, if my sum is greater than my number, I want to decrease my right no, I actually want to, decrease my left, else I want to just increase my right. And I could do this either way. I can do right, decrement my right, or increase, wait, hold on. So, right. Yeah, I want to increment my left and decrement my right. And then I can actually just go if there aren't any matches, so if the array of numbers dot length equals 0, that means I haven't pushed anything to the array. I can return unable to find pairs. Else I can just return array of numbers. So I can test that out by just going, if I'm testing 9, so this is what, 4 and 0. So if 0 is less than 4, if the value, so 1 plus 5, that's 6. Is 6 equal 9? No. Else is 6 greater than 9? Nope. So my right is decremented. Wait, hold on. Does that make sense? I might have messed up somewhere. Right. So if the sum. Oh. There we go. I think that's where it. So if the sum is less than, I need to increase. There we go. So that makes sense.
I think your sort might need a callback function too.
Let's see. I think sort just works.
I think
Yeah.
it goes off like the ASCII values of the numbers for some reason. So if you put in like a two-digit number, it might throw it off.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Let's run test. Uh-oh, what happened? So only one passed. Let's see which one passed. Oh. See, issue there. Oh no, what's going on? To be received serialized to the same string. I don't know what that means.
Do you need to make it to equal?
I think that might be it. To equal. Yeah, because when it said to be is the same equivalent for numbers. Okay, there we go. So it passed that. Now, if I did want to account for, because I know that sort is kind of messed up sometimes. I think if I have negative numbers too, like things can be messed up. But overall, this logic should get you the answer. The only thing that you might need to do is adjust the sort by taking that callback. I don't know, is it like A, B? I can't remember what to actually get it sorted right.
Factorial A minus B.
A minus B, something like that. Does
Yep.
that work? It's been a while since I did that. So you can add additional unit tests if you want to account for different array lengths and different values of the input. But this is one way you can do it. If you did a nested for loop, that's also totally okay. Just know that it's not as efficient, but that's okay. All right.
In terms of efficiency, are we talking about it being like that word? Efficient, like, does it matter once it gets a little bit bigger?
You're muted.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yep. No, yeah, sorry, I was muted. In an equation like this, like to be perfectly candid, like doing something like this, it's negligible. However, if you are interviewing for a job and you're given this, generally speaking, nested for loops should try to be avoided, but the first thing you should do is solve the question and then go back and refactor it to try to optimize it. So first solve it. If the only way you can solve it is like using a nested for loop, go ahead and do that. And then go back if you have time to be like, all right, I should probably try to figure out a way to optimize it without using a nested for loop. But that's totally okay. So just know that during interview questions, a nested for loop is probably not the most efficient way to solve it. And that's okay, because I've had technical interviews where I solved it using a nested for loop. And then like the next day I was in the shower thinking, I was like, oh crap, I could have solved it using something else, but that didn't really matter because I still, passed that part of the interview. So again, making sure you get the answer first or solve the challenge first is the most important thing. And then go back if there's time, if there is time, and optimize it. All right. So I solved it. Great. Now I need to push this up, but I don't necessarily want to push up. You never want to push up node modules up to GitHub because this is a very large directory. It's very large and it'll take up a lot of memory. So there's a couple of ways I can do that. I can literally just git add, some pairs JS. I can manually some pairs test.js and package dot. So I can manually add these, or you can add what is called a Git Ignore file to your directory. A Git Ignore, it's a period followed by Git Ignore. That tells you what files or directories do you want to ignore when you push up. And you can say, I want to avoid running or inputting the node modules to my Git repo. So I can do what I just did, git status. So I added these files, package.json, some pairs test. So instead of manually adding individual files, I can do what I typically do, git add everything. And now if I do git status, notice how it added all the files in directories, or I'm sorry, all the files, including this git ignore file, but it did not add my node modules. And notice how node modules is grayed out now. It's because I added node modules to my git ignore file. If I delete that and save it, now node modules is highlighted. That means it's added, will be added to my Git repository. But if I run node modules and save it, it gets grayed out. VS Code does a very good job at visually telling us as developers kind of what's going on. So
the GitHub site has instructions, but I found it helpful to set up the global Git Ignore file. And then I just imported a bunch of JavaScript and Python Git Ignore configs that they listed in templates to avoid that. Like when you run Python files, it automatically creates that like PyCache.
nice.
So instead of removing it, and that way you don't have to add it to each individual
Git ignore file. Yeah, it's a good idea. I probably should do that. But yeah, so git status. So I added these to the staging area. Git commit instructor. Then git push origin master. There we go. So if I look over here, Tom Preet some pairs. So it's right here, instructor solution. That's what I just committed. I just did the JavaScript. It was updated 15 seconds ago. I can go to pull requests. I can create a new pull request. And now it's going to part-time Charlie's. It's saying, hey, in the base repository, in the master branch of some pairs and part-time Charlie platoons, GitHub, I'm requesting to pull in Tom Preet's some pairs master branch. So I can create a pull request. I can add some notes here if I wanted to. I'm just going to create that pull request. And now I can see all the different pull requests right here. All right. What questions do you have about that overall process?
I have a question about the Git Ignore. So that's a file that you put in the JS directory, but is that acting as the Git Ignore file for the overall repo to include the JS and Python folders?
I believe you can. I actually don't know. I think you can. You just have to give the directory or the path to whatever other files you want to ignore.
Oh, okay. But
I could have
it'll
easily,
work that way.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. But if it doesn't work that way, I can easily just add or remove the Git Ignore from my JS file and bring it up one directory to my the parent directory where it's on
Okay.
the
Yeah, that was sorry, that was throwing me off because I was because you forked and cloned the directory with both of them, and even though you're in the JS directory, you're still on the master branch. I guess that's what was kind of throwing me, right?
Okay. Yeah. So here, yeah, I'm still on the master branch. I probably should have created a branch, like some other solution branch, but so yeah, I could also, as I said, add it to the parent directory. It'll still work. Notice how node modules is still grayed out. I can do git add or git commit, moved, git ignore, git push origin master. And I've already made that pull request. And if I look over here, so here's my initial commit. Here's the one I just pushed. I can look at the change files, or I can click on Tom Preet master, and you can see, oh, that's weird. That's weird.
Is it just hiding it because it's
Maybe. Yeah, I've never seen that before. Anyway, but it's up there. Cool. All right. It should be up there. Anyway. Yeah, anyone else have any other questions?
I'm trying to run just as following along and I'm getting an error. Can I see the top of your test file? I think it has something to do with the require statement in the imports.
I'm going to stop the recording